the chair was already gone when I arrived, not misplaced, not accidentally moved to another table by an inattentive busboy. Gone with intention, removed from the six-person table where the other five place settings remained perfectly arranged, the absence of the sixth so deliberate that the white tablecloth had been smoothed over the space where it had been, as though erasing even the suggestion that a seat had ever existed there. I stood at the edge of the private dining room of Sera, one of the most celebrated restaurants in the city, 3 years on every best of list, reservation wait time measured in months, and I understood, with the specific clarity of a person who has been handed an unmistakable message, exactly what I was looking at. 5 people at the table. 5 chairs, the table had been reserved for 6. The 6th reservation was mine. My name was on it. My name that everyone at that table knew. My name that the woman who had arranged this dinner, my former colleague, now client, now apparently something else entirely, had written on the reservation, and then, at some point between writing it and my arrival, had decided to remove from the room along with the furniture. Her name was Camille Rousseau. She was 44 years old, a senior partner at the consulting firm where I had worked for 6 years, and the woman who had, over the past 18 months, systematically taken every piece of work I had produced, every client relationship I had built, and every professional opportunity I had created, and positioned herself between me and the recognition of it with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood that credit in their industry was a finite resource best hoarded. She was sitting at the head of the table in a red dress that had been chosen. I understood from the specific way she looked up when I appeared in the doorway. For exactly this occasion, she looked at me. She looked at the space where my chair had been. She looked back at me. "Oh," she said, "I didn't think you were coming. My name is Sera Nakamura. I am 38 years old." And the evening Camille Rousseau removed my chair from a restaurant I did not yet own was the last evening she made a decision in any room I was present in. I need to tell you who Camille was before I tell you who she became. She had been, in the early years, something close to a mentor. Not the warm, invested kind. Camille did not do warmth in the invested sense. She did warmth in the strategic sense. The kind dispensed precisely and withdrawn when the dispensing had served its purpose. But she had been useful, and useful had felt, at 28 when I was new to the industry, and learning which rooms mattered and how to enter them, like enough. She had taught me how to build client relationships in the specific language of the consulting world, the hospitality of it, the careful social architecture of lunches and dinners, and the particular choreography of making powerful people feel heard. I had been an excellent student. This would turn out to be the problem. By 32, I was better at the client relationships than she was. Not because I had displaced her methods, but because I had absorbed them and added something she did not have, a genuine curiosity about the people on the other side of the table that her performance of warmth had never quite replicated. My clients felt with me actually known. This was not strategy. It was simply how I operated, and it produced results that were, by the metrics the firm used to evaluate such things, superior to hers. She had noticed by the time I was 33. What followed were 3 years of the specific, elegant warfare of a woman who understood her industry and had decided that the most efficient response to a colleague who was becoming more capable than her was not to become more capable herself, but to ensure that the colleague's capability was never clearly attributed to the colleague. The presentation I had built for Hartwell, that she had delivered as her own. The Morrison account I had developed from a cold introduction to a 7-figure retainer that had appeared in the annual report under her client development portfolio. The Steinberg recommendation. 6 months of research and framework development that had become the centerpiece of a client success story, in which my name appeared in the acknowledgments and hers appeared as the author. I had documented all of it. And I had said nothing, not from passivity, from the deliberate calculation of someone who understood that premature confrontation without sufficient leverage produced only the appearance of grievance without the possibility of resolution. I had been building leverage for 2 years. The dinner was supposed to be the beginning of a different phase. The dinner. 6 colleagues, a celebration of a client win that I had, in the most direct and documentable sense, been responsible for, was supposed to be the evening I arrived with the specific professional standing of someone who could no longer be quietly erased. Instead, I was standing in a doorway looking at a white tablecloth, smoothed over the space where my chair had been. What I did in that moment is the part of the story people ask about most. I did not make a scene. This is important because the temptation existed. I am honest enough to acknowledge the temptation, the very human impulse to stand in that doorway and say something that the room would not forget, and that Camille would feel across the following years every time she entered a restaurant and looked for a chair. I did not do that. What I did was take out my phone. I opened my camera. I photographed the table, the 5 chairs, the 5-place settings, the smooth tablecloth, from the doorway. Then I turned and walked out of Sorel's private dining room, through the main dining room, past the host stand, and out onto the street. I called my attorney, a precise and unflappable woman named Priya, who had been working with me for 18 months on a matter that was, as of that evening, significantly more urgent than it had been an hour earlier. I need to move the timeline, I said. How far? Priya said. As far forward as we can get it. I said, I want everything ready to file within the week. A pause. The documentation is ready, she said. I've been waiting for your word. You have my word, I said. Sera. Her voice had the specific tone of a lawyer about to ask a clarifying question. The restaurant acquisition, the Sorel offer. It's still on the table from what I understand. Yes, I said. You've been holding it. I've been deciding, I said. And now, I looked at the restaurant's facade, the understated sign, the warm light through the windows, the particular quality of an establishment that had been built with care and had arrived at the specific crossroads that brought it to the market. Call the broker, I said. Tell him we're moving forward. Tonight, she said. Tonight, I said. Tell him I want the deal closed in 30 days. I should explain the Sorel offer. Sorel had been on my professional radar for 14 months, not as a dinner destination, but as an acquisition target. The restaurant had been founded and operated for 11 years by a chef named Laurent Beaumont, whose culinary vision had built its reputation and whose business acumen had not quite kept pace with his creative one. The operation was profitable but under-leveraged, with a physical space and a brand that had significantly more value than the current ownership structure was capturing. I had built, over 6 years at the consulting firm, a practice that no one had formally recognized as mine, a specialty in hospitality sector strategic consulting that had produced more results for more clients in that sector than anyone else at the firm had managed. I had done it quietly, methodically, with the specific patience of someone who understood that the work was building something, whether or not the credit was landing correctly. The work had also built me. It had built relationships with operators, investors, and brokers across the hospitality sector that existed independently of the firm. In my name, in the context of the expertise I had developed, in the network of people who knew me as the person whose thinking they trusted regardless of what letterhead it arrived on. Laurent had been introduced to me through one of those relationships. We had met 4 times over 14 months. He was ready to transition. He wanted a partner who understood what he had built. He had found in the conversations we had someone who did. The offer had been waiting for me to make a decision. Camille had made it for me. The acquisition closed in 28 days. Priya had pushed every component with the focused efficiency of someone who understands that momentum is its own kind of leverage. The financing was structured through a combination of personal capital, 6 years of performance compensation that had been invested, not spent, with the patience of someone who had always known it would eventually be needed for exactly this, and a credit facility that Priya had arranged through a lender who had worked with me on a previous transaction. I became the majority owner of Sorel on a Wednesday afternoon. Laurent stayed on as executive chef. This was the specific arrangement he had wanted and I had committed to, because Sorel's value lived in his kitchen and protecting that value meant protecting his role within it. I hired a new general manager, a meticulous and gifted woman named Daphne, who had been running operations at a comparable establishment for 4 years, and who came with the specific quality I was looking for. Someone who understood that hospitality was not just about the food, but about how every person in the building was made to feel. I communicated to Daphne on her first day the standards I expected. Every guest, I said, is treated with the same dignity. Every guest has a chair, and any behavior from any person in this building that violates that standard is addressed immediately and, if necessary, conclusively. Daphne looked at me. How conclusively? She said. As conclusively as the behavior warrants. I said. She nodded. She understood. I did not arrange what happened next. I want to be precise about this because precision matters and because the story is more interesting, I think, when it is accurate. I did not plan the evening. I did not orchestrate it. I did not call ahead and instruct anyone to watch for a specific reservation and execute a specific response. What I did was own the restaurant. And ownership, it turns out, has a way of making certain evenings inevitable. Camille made a reservation at Sorel 6 weeks after the acquisition. I know because our reservation system notified me. I had set up alerts for reservations under several names, hers among them, not from revenge, but from the operational instinct of someone who wanted to be aware of significant guests. She came on a Friday evening. She came with 3 clients. Important ones, the kind of dinner that was about relationship architecture and the performance of being someone who could get a table at a restaurant where tables were famously unavailable. She was shown to the table. She ordered wine. She was 45 minutes into an evening that was going well for her. And then she did the thing that people with very specific habits do when those habits have never encountered consequences. She performed for her clients in the particular way that she had always performed, which was to manage the people serving her in a register that demonstrated her authority by diminishing theirs. The server was a young man named Oliver, who had been with Sorel for 3 years, and whom Laurent had described to me as one of the finest front-of-house people he had ever worked with. Camille spoke to Oliver in a way that I will not repeat verbatim because the specific content is less important than its nature, which was dismissive in the register of someone who considers the person serving them to be furniture rather than a person. Oliver handled it with the professional composure of someone who had learned to absorb this kind of treatment. Daphne saw it. Daphne crossed the dining room. She stopped at Camille's table. She introduced herself as the general manager. She said, with the warm, clear firmness of someone exercising a standard she believed in and had been given full authority to enforce, "I want to make sure your experience this evening reflects the standards we hold at Sorel. Part of those standards extend to the way our team is spoken to. We ask all of our guests to observe that standard. If that's something you're comfortable with, we're delighted to continue your evening. If not, we're happy to arrange for the check to be settled and for you to be on your way." Camille looked at Daphne. Camille looked at her clients. Camille looked at the dining room around her, the full Friday evening service, the ambient hum of a room operating at its best. "Do you know who I am?" she said. "I know you're our guest," Daphne said. "The standard applies to everyone." A silence. Camille's clients were looking at their menus with the focused attention of people who have decided that this is not their situation to manage. "I'd like to speak to the owner," Camille said. "Of course," Daphne said. "I'll let her know you've asked." I was in the office on the second floor when Daphne knocked. She told me what had happened. She told me what Camille had requested. I sat with it for a moment. "Is she still at the table?" I said. "Yes," Daphne said. "With clients?" "3 of them." I thought about a white tablecloth smoothed over the space where my chair had been. I thought about 6 years of presentations and reports and client relationships that had appeared in other people's portfolios. I thought about Oliver, who was 26 years old and had been described to me by the chef I trusted most as one of the finest people he had ever worked with. "I'll come down," I said. I straightened my jacket. I walked downstairs. I crossed the dining room, Laurent's dining room, my dining room, the room I had acquired because a chair had been removed, and I had decided that the removal was the last thing I would allow to happen in a room I did not control. I stopped at Camille's table. She saw me. The sequence took longer than 8 seconds. It took closer to 15. Because what Camille was processing was not simply the presence of an unexpected face. It was the reorientation of everything. 6 years of professional history, the chair, the smooth tablecloth, the photograph on my phone, the acquisition she had not known about, the general manager who reported to the owner who was standing at her table in a restaurant she had chosen to perform in and which had turned out to belong to the person she had spent 6 years trying to erase. "Sera," she said. "Camille," I said. A silence. "You own this restaurant." She said. "I do," I said. "Have for 6 weeks." Her clients were very still. "Daphne told me you asked to speak with the owner," I said. "I'm here. Is there something you'd like to address?" She looked at me. She looked at her clients. She looked at the table. "I think there may have been a misunderstanding," she said, "with the server." "Oliver," I said. "His name is Oliver. He's been here 3 years. He's exceptional at his job." I paused. "The standard Daphne described is not a misunderstanding. It's how this restaurant operates. For every guest, including you." A silence. "I'd like to continue my dinner," she said. "That's your choice," I said. "The standard remains." I held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then I said, quietly and without drama, the register of someone stating a fact. "The chair, Camille. 6 weeks ago. I wanted you to know that I remember it. I will always remember it. And I want you to know that the reason there is always a chair for every person in this room is because I decided that night on the street outside that I was going to own the room." She said nothing. "Enjoy your dinner." I said. I turned. I walked back through the dining room, past Oliver, who gave me a small, precise nod, and back upstairs to my office. Camille's table settled their check 40 minutes later, early. The dessert course untouched. Daphne sent me a message. "They've left. Oliver is fine. Laurent says the halibut is exceptional tonight and wants to know if you're eating." I wrote back. "Tell him yes. And tell Oliver his table is the best in the house if he wants it." The filing with the firm's ethics board went in the following week. Priya had prepared it with the specific thoroughness she brought to everything. 18 months of documentation, organized in the clear, logical sequence of evidence that did not require interpretation because the pattern spoke for itself. Camille was placed on administrative leave, pending review within the month. I had left the firm by then. Not dramatically. I had given proper notice, transitioned my client relationships with the professionalism that the clients deserved regardless of what the firm had allowed to happen, and walked out of the building on my last day with the specific lightness of someone who has put down something heavy and is recalibrating to the weight of their own hands. 3 of my former clients followed me into the advisory practice I established, a boutique hospitality strategy consultancy that operated from an office above Sorel and that drew in its first year on 6 years of expertise that had always been mine and was now, finally, operating under my name. Laurent and I developed a working relationship that became one of the most creatively productive of my career, his culinary vision and my business architecture producing a version of Sorel that in its second year under new ownership received a recognition that the previous 11 years had not managed. Oliver was promoted to head of front of house. He accepted with the dignified composure of someone who had always known his worth and had simply been waiting for a room that reflected it back. Before you go, I need your honest answer in the comments right now. When Sera walked to that table, should she have had Camille removed immediately? Or was giving her the choice to stay the more powerful move? This debate genuinely splits people, and I want to know exactly where you land. Tell me right now, if this story moved something in you, if you have ever had a chair removed from your place at the table by someone who underestimated what you were building, hit that like button so this story reaches every person who needs it today. Share it with someone who is documenting, building, and waiting for the right moment, because the moment always comes. And if you believe that the most powerful room is the one you own, subscribe, because every week this channel brings you the stories of women who were erased from tables and went out and bought the restaurant. You do not want to miss what is coming next week. Your first month of Audible is completely free. Over 500,000 titles waiting in the description below. For the ones who photographed the empty space and made it mean something, the link is right there. Use it today.